I'm Marie, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the importance of female protagonists in dystopias. My Twitter handle is MarieD with 4 E's, so feel free to tweet me any questions or comments or critique about my presentation and its content. So what really stemmed my research is that I just noticed in the vast majority of dystopias that I've read or watched, they have a female protagonist. So I started to question, what can a female protagonist accomplish for these dystopias that a male protagonist can? And what I came up with is that authors and screenwriters of dystopian works are using a female protagonist as a mechanism to challenge stereotypes and expectations that we may have of young women in our own societies, which ultimately leads to their empowerment. So I came up with this by examining the skills and qualities that our female protagonists have, their inclusion in love triangles, and also real-life activism that we see in our own world due to these female protagonists. So the 2 main dystopias that I'll be looking at are The Hunger Games, since we're also familiar with it, as well as The Selection, which is my independent reading choice by Kiera Cass. And just a quick overview, it's basically a dystopian version of The Bachelor. They're living in a society that is ruled by a monarch, and they're sorted into different castes, which are kind of like the districts. And basically 35 girls have their names drawn, and they go into this competition, and it's all televised, and they compete for the prince's hand in marriage. And the main character is named America, and she's from a lower caste, and she goes into the competition and ends up winning over the prince pretty quickly, but uses this relationship to kind of influence policy within their society. And there is a love triangle between America, the Prince Maxon, and her hometown boyfriend, Aspen. So first, looking at the skills and qualities that our female protagonists have. Off the top of your head, you can probably name a few really quickly, like Katniss and her bow and arrow. She's a hunter. America has a lot of charisma. She always stands up for what she thinks is right. So these skills help the protagonists have stronger or more heroic goals and accomplishments. I think it's easy to see the contrast between the female protagonists in dystopia literature and just regular YA fiction. I think just compare Bella from Twilight to Katniss, their accomplishments are very different. And these skills also help our female protagonists garner girl power, which is a concept that I wrote a lot about in my research and is defined as the attitude of self-assertiveness and political insight, which I think is very evident with both America and Katniss. They are not people pleasers, and they use their influence to make policy changes within their respective societies. So the skills and qualities that the protagonist is equipped with are basically her weapons to help her fight for her cause. It's America versus the caste system and inequality. It's Katniss versus the Capitol. So this is important because reading about or watching these female protagonists with fierce qualities and an obvious impact on her own society is empowering for young female readers because they connect to the main character, which kind of goes back to the identification effect that Andrea was talking about in her presentation. And also it's insightful and can even be correcting for any reader that comes in with a perception that might be influenced by society's standards and expectations. So next, we're looking at love triangles, which is a very common feature I noticed in dystopias that have a female protagonist, so I wanted to know why. Something I kept coming across is that it's a big sales booster. People argue that authors are including love triangles just because it sells well, which is true. And I even found a quote from Suzanne Collins' editor who said that she did ask Suzanne Collins to play up the love triangle, but this also kind of insinuates that the love triangle was already there, so Suzanne Collins had a purpose for it regardless of sales, which could be one of the following reasons. I think love triangles serve to symbolize a bigger choice that the female protagonist is making about her life and her future. The 2 boys that she's choosing between are often 2 different symbols. So if we look at the selection, America is choosing between Prince Maxon, who is a life under the spotlight, but also a life of opportunity and chance to change their society for better. Or she could choose Aspen, her hometown boyfriend, which would be a life more under the radar, but she doesn't have an opportunity to make any changes to her society. In addition to symbolism, I think love triangles also provide the protagonist a source of control. When we're looking at these dystopian societies, the protagonists often have very little control over their own lives. They're sorted into castes and districts. They're obligated to these competitions that control the outcome of their futures. So with the presence of a love triangle, America and Katniss are provided a choice that they didn't have before, and which women in some cultures around the world today still don't have. So I think that overall the purpose of love triangles is to create the presence of choice, which is empowering because it gives the female protagonist a source of control over her future, and it also challenges stereotypes and practices that involve women today in our world. So now looking at some real life activism, I've kind of been talking about some theoretical impacts of having these female protagonists, but there's actually a camp that was started in Kenya and inspired by Katniss. It's called the Girls on Fire Leadership Camp. And their purpose is to bring young girls in and kind of put them in the mindset that they are part of the solution and teach them leadership skills and how to make change in their own society. So I think this is really important because it goes back to the idea of girl power, except for now it's being transferred from Katniss off the pages of the book, off the movie screen, into the young female readers and viewers in the real world. So in conclusion, I think that the overall critique from the dystopia isn't changed, like we're still getting the same message from the dystopia. However, the authors using the female protagonist to send that message is sending underlying messages along with it. So yes, a male protagonist could accomplish the same things that Katniss did regarding the plot line. Like, yes, a male protagonist could overthrow the Capitol. However, if Suzanne Collins had used a male protagonist, it wouldn't have challenged stereotypes and expectations about young women in our society, nor would it inspire activism or contribute to empowerment of young women in our own society today. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.